Honorable External Affairs Minister, please. बाद में हो चुकी ये बात हो चुकी है. No. Please, Honorable Minister, please. बैठिए
दादा
बैठिए सर बैठिए. No, it was informed earlier. No, please. आप प्लीज शुरू करें.
Honorable Speaker, sir,
जी बैठिए.
I rise to make a statement. Rise to make a statement to this August House on the situation in Ukraine and the implications that it has had for India, including for our nationals resident there. Despite the challenges posed by the serious ongoing conflict, we have ensured that about 22,500 citizens have returned home safely. 22,500. The House would recognize the complexity of the various endeavours that have made it possible. Allow me to share them in some detail. As honourable members may be aware, a tense situation between Russia and Ukraine erupted into conflict on 24 February 2022. The root causes for this are complex, going back to a range of issues, including the security architecture, political governance and interstate politics. To that was added the challenges of implementing understandings reached earlier. What is pertinent to note is that hostilities placed the Indian community of 20,000 plus in direct danger. Even while we were participating in the global deliberations of this evolving situation in the UN Security Council, the pressing challenge was to safeguard our citizens and ensure that they were not in harm's way. At the direction of the Prime Minister, we launched Operation Ganga, thereby undertaking one of the most challenging evacuation exercises during an ongoing conflict situation. Our community was dispersed across Ukraine, posing its own logistical challenges. The exercise was undertaken at a time when military actions, including airstrikes and shelling, were underway. It involved movement in a war-torn situation in a large country, at times lengths over 1,000 kilometers, and it required exiting borders clogged by an estimated 26 lakh refugees. The entire exercise involved a whole of the government approach, with the Prime Minister himself chairing review meetings almost on a daily basis. At the MEA, we monitored the evacuation operations on a 24/7 basis as well. We got excellent support from all the concerned ministries and organizations, including the Ministry of Civil Aviation, the Ministry of Defence, the National Disaster Response Force, the Indian Air Force and private airlines. There was effective coordination with state governments in ensuring that arrangements made by them for return of Indian nationals to their respective states once they landed in Delhi and Mumbai. Mr. Speaker, sir, let me apprise members of the steps taken in advance of the actual conflict situation. As tensions increased, the Embassy of India in Ukraine had started a registration drive for Indian nationals in January 2022. As a result, around 20,000 Indian nationals registered with our embassy in Kyiv. Most of the Indian nationals were students who were pursuing medical education in Ukrainian universities dispersed throughout the country. More than half the students were in universities in eastern Ukraine that borders Russia and has been the epicenter of the conflict so far. The students hail from 35 states and union territories of India, with more than 1,000 students each from the states of Kerala, UP, Haryana, Tamil Nadu, Gujarat, Maharashtra, Bihar and Rajasthan. In view of the continued build-up of tensions in February, the embassy in Kiev issued
सुनिए तो सही, सुन लीजिए कॉपी नहीं है कॉपी बैठिए कॉपी डिस्ट्रीब्यूट करवा दीजिए.
The Embassy of India
आ रही है कॉपी. अब सुनिए ऐसी कोई बात नहीं है, बहुत महत्वपूर्ण इशू है, महत्वपूर्ण. आप भी गंभीरता से सुनिए प्लीज कोऑपरेट. कॉपीज आर कमिंग, कॉपी आर रीचिंग. चलिए प्लीज चलिए नहीं बैठिए, आप भी बैठिए प्लीज, आप भी बैठ जाइए.
दूसरे हाउस में स्टेटमेंट चल रहा था भाई, दूसरे हाउस में
आ गई है कॉपी. अब
हाँ हाउस में
अभी आ गई है, नाराज मत होइए, बैठ जाइए.
हाउस में स्टेटमेंट चल रहा
बैठिए.
अरे दूसरे हाउस में डोनर, आप सुनिए अधीर रतन जी, डोनर डिमांड ऑफ ग्रांट फॉर डोनर की रिप्लाई थी रिप्लाई के बाद और हमने स्पीकर साहब से अनुमति ली कि 4 बजे स्टेटमेंट देंगे। और
अधीर जी बैठिए।
स्टेटमेंट दे रहे हैं और ये सर्कुलेट भी हो गया आपको।
अधीर जी बैठ जाइए प्लीज। ऑनरेबल मेंबर प्लीज सिट डाउन प्लीज। ओके नाउ द कॉपीज आर विद यू नाउ प्लीज। ओके बैठिए प्लीज। ऑनरेबल मिनिस्टर आप बैठ जाइए प्लीज। नाउ बैठ जाइए प्लीज सिट डाउन। ओके now these copies are in house now. Please. Okay sir. Okay Tharoor साहब please बैठिए जी।
In view of the
Okay sir. Okay जी।
In view of the continued build-up of tensions in February, the embassy issued an advisory on 15 February advising Indian nationals in Ukraine whose stay is not essential to leave the country temporarily. It also advised Indian nationals not to travel to Ukraine or to undertake non-essential movements within Ukraine. Members will appreciate that such advisories are extremely unusual, and their very issue is itself a serious caution. Further advisories were given on 20 February and 22 February, pressing students to leave. Air bubble restrictions then in force were immediately lifted in consultation with Ukrainian side to increase the number of flights. As a result, around 4,000 Indian nationals departed from Ukraine by direct and indirect flights till 23 February. Despite our efforts, however, a large majority of students elected to continue staying in Ukraine. We must understand their predicament in this regard. There was a natural reluctance to leave educational institutions and affect their studies. Some universities actively discouraged the departure of students and showed reluctance to offer online studies. Many of them received conflicting advice from their universities regarding safety. The challenges of travel back may have also been a factor. In the period leading to 24 February, the political signals were confusing as well. Public urgings by authorities not to be taken in by alarmism and reports of Russian force withdrawals created a confusing picture. The net result was that 18,000 Indian citizens were caught in the midst of conflict when it began. The ministry had started reinforcing the strength of our mission in Ukraine in anticipation of a difficult situation. Additional Russian-speaking officers were deputed to Kiev on 22 February to our embassy to keep in constant touch with distressed Indian nationals in Ukraine and their families in India. A situation room was established in Delhi on 16 February. The embassy took parallel measures. The MEA situation room was ramped up to over 100 personnel, allowing them to respond to over 13,000 calls and over 9,000 emails to date. The strategy for evacuation was to take out Indian nationals from the western neighboring countries of Ukraine, that is Poland, Slovak Republic, Hungary, Romania and Moldova. This was necessitated due to closure of Ukrainian airspace on 24 February. To carry this out, we were required to strengthen our missions in these countries so that they could deploy teams at the border points, set up transit camps, operate effective control rooms, and facilitate the large number of air flights. Along with that, they also handled incoming humanitarian assistance. 47 additional MEA officials were dispatched to ensure these objectives, supplementing a pre-existing embassy strength of 58. Honourable members should appreciate that along with our embassy personnel, these officials have gone to extraordinary lengths in difficult circumstances to ensure that Operation Ganga is successful. Their constant intervention at border checkpoints helped to address severe challenges posed by overcongestion. The liaison with local governments and community organizations was responsible for boarding, lodging and medical attention of evacuees. And of course, they handled the complexity of flight operations on the ground so that the return home was a smoother process. Under Operation Ganga, 90 flights have been operated. out of which 76 were civilian flights and 14 were Indian Air Force flights. The evacuation flights were from Romania, Poland, Hungary and Slovakia. While IAF rose to the occasion, most of the private airlines, including Air India Express, Indigo, SpiceJet, Vistara, GoAir and AirAsia, also participated enthusiastically. During this period, honourable members should know that Prime Minister himself spoke to the presidents of Russia and Ukraine on multiple occasions. He specifically took up the issue of safe evacuation of Indian nationals, especially from Kharkiv and Sumy. Prime Minister spoke to the Prime Ministers of Romania, Slovak Republic and Hungary and to the President of Poland to seek support for facilitation of entry of Indian nationals to their country. I must sincerely thank these partner countries for opening the doors and helping our citizens in our hour of need. I myself was in constant touch with my counterparts in Ukraine, Russia, Poland, Romania, Hungary, Slovakia and Moldova for similar reasons. Foreign Secretary maintained contact with ambassadors of Ukraine and Russia, while our own ambassadors in Moscow and Kiev followed up in their respective capitals. Prime Minister deputed 4 union ministers as special envoy to Romania, Hungary, Slovak Republic and Poland to facilitate Operation Ganga. They included Sri Jyotiraditya Scindia to Romania, Sri Kiren Rijiju to Slovak Republic, Sri Hardeep Singh Puri to Hungary and General V.K. Singh to Poland. Their personal supervision of the evacuation process made a substantial difference in the ease of border crossing and the care taken of our citizens thereafter. The most challenging part of the evacuation exercise was that of evacuating Indian nationals from Kharkiv and Sumy. Both places witnessed very heavy shelling and airstrikes. Many options were worked out to evacuate students through buses and trains. A team of our embassy in Moscow was also sent to the Russia-Ukraine border to facilitate possible evacuation through that route. They were there in Belgorod and Kursk. Many students from Kharkiv were moved to Pesochin in view of the anticipated escalation of hostilities. While our efforts were able to stave off the more extreme scenarios, the presence in a safety zone allowed for subsequent ferrying through buses to the western borders. The Sumy evacuation, which was the last one on a significant scale, was extremely complex. Our students faced the prospect of being caught in a crossfire. Their evacuation from the city needed a credible ceasefire, a daunting challenge in the current situation. This finally materialized due to the personal intervention of the Prime Minister, himself with the Presidents of Ukraine and Russia. Noting the extraordinary challenges before us, we also dispatched a special team of senior officials to the vicinity of Sumy. Their coordination with the military forces deployed there with the ICRC and arrangements for logistics was responsible for the final outcome. I should also add, sir, that students of other nations also came out with us when we evacuated from Sumy. During the entire period, our embassy in Ukraine has been working incessantly to contact Indian nationals, arranging and facilitating transport, coordinating with local authorities, providing food, etc. Through the evacuation exercise, they were in touch with the Ukrainian authorities, and we appreciate the positive response to our many requests. This intervention was responsible for running additional trains that were needed for the evacuation. The embassy also provided travel documents within a very, very short time, sometimes within a matter of hours, to Indian nationals who had lost their passport during the evacuation confusion. They also partnered with neighbouring embassies to resolve challenging situations on the border. On 13th March, in view of the deteriorating situation in western Ukraine, it has been decided to temporarily relocate our embassy from Ukraine to Poland. We will be reassessing that in light of further developments. Honourable members should also recognise the great contribution made by community representatives, volunteers and NGOs in the evacuation exercise. Equally noteworthy were the efforts of Indian businesses in the countries neighbouring Ukraine and indeed in Ukraine itself. In numerous ways, they provided transport, shelter and sustenance to the evacuating students. They ensured that our citizens did not become a burden for Ukraine's neighbours who at that time were receiving refugees in large numbers. In line with India's principle of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, foreign nationals were also evacuated from conflict zones and brought to India. They included about 150 citizens, actually 147 to be exact, of 18 countries. Among them are immediate neighbors like Bangladesh and Nepal. Many of the Ukrainian nationals that are family members of Indian nationals have also been evacuated. We also provided free passage to Ukrainian nationals from India to Poland in our evacuation flights. In response to the emerging humanitarian situation, India has provided relief supplies to Ukraine and its neighbors. A total of 90 tons of relief material, including medicines, tents, blankets, sleeping mats, tarpaulins, gloves, goggles, etc., have been provided. Honourable members are aware that at Kharkiv, a final year medical student of Kharkiv Medical University, Naveen Shekarappa Gyangaudar, unfortunately lost his life. He succumbed to injuries received when he had gone to fetch groceries from a shop. We deeply mourn his untimely demise. Our prayers are with his family and his loved ones. Our embassy in Ukraine is diligently pursuing the repatriation of his mortal remains to India. I would also like to mention the assistance provided to another Indian national, 𝐒𝐻𝐿 Singh, who suffered bullet injuries on his way out from Kyiv. His medical expenses were taken care of and arrangements were made to move him from Kyiv to the Polish border. He was brought back in an IAF flight accompanied by a doctor arranged by us. The unfolding developments in Ukraine have simultaneously played out in the United Nations, in particular the Security Council, where India is currently serving as a non-permanent member. India's position on the Ukraine conflict has been steadfast and consistent. We have expressed deep concern at the worsening situation and called for immediate cessation of violence and end to all hostilities. Our statement at the Security Council and the General Assembly have urged an urgent ceasefire and ensuring safe passage for stranded civilians. We have also highlighted humanitarian assistance extended by India to Ukraine and its neighbors. We have reiterated at the highest levels to all parties concerned that there is no other choice but the path of diplomacy and dialogue. We have emphasized to all member states of the UN that the global order is anchored on international law, UN Charter, and respect for territorial integrity and sovereignty of states. The Ukraine conflict has major economic implications. Its impact on energy and commodity prices is already visible. The disruption of the global supply chain is expected to be significant. India has substantial dealings with both Russia and Ukraine. An assessment in this regard by the government is underway. However, the House will appreciate that there is all the more need for an Atmanirbhar Bharat. Operation Ganga is a testimony of our commitment to ensure that Indians in distress situations abroad can count on their government. We have already shown this on numerous occasions before, but rarely in one as challenging as the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. No other country has evacuated as many people as we have done from Ukraine. Some nations still have hundreds, even thousands of their citizens still dead. I am confident that the honourable members of this House would join me in commending the efforts of the government, the officials of the MEA, particularly the concerned embassies, Ministry of Civil Aviation, Ministry of Defence, NDRF, the Indian Air Force, private airlines, and all those who work tirelessly and ceaselessly for the safe return of our nationals. I would like to convey our sincerest appreciation to local Indian communities in those countries, civil societies, volunteer organizations. What is most noteworthy, however, is the courage and determination of our young students in Ukraine, some of whom had to face difficult situations in active conflict zones. Sir, these are undeniably challenging times, but the House may rest assured that whether it is our approach to the political situation, the implications for the economy, or the welfare of Indians abroad, our government will respond with the confidence, diligence, and responsibility that has been our hallmark. Thank you.